You're a busy professional. You don't have time for fluff. You need strategies that work, and you need them fast. Welcome to Busy Bro Fast Wellness with me, your host, Alan Welch. We're here to give you science-backed hacks and actionable tips to boost your focus, minimize friction, and maximize your results. Less time, more impact. It's time to get well, stay strong, and thrive. Let's get to it. Hi there everyone. Today I'm excited to share an interview that I had with the inspirational content creator Scott Lynch, who is the host of the very successful The Motivated Mind podcast. The conversation was so packed with insights that we ended up speaking for 55 minutes, so I am splitting this into two parts. This week is part one. Scott provides some powerful strategies for optimizing both your happiness and your productivity, and we explore the profound impact of minimalism and simplicity in modern life, and also how to find more joy and effectiveness every single day. It's an engaging and inspiring episode, so I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. I'll see you on the other side. Hello everyone, I'm thrilled to welcome Scott Lynch as our special guest today. He's a true maestro of powerful insights into mindset, personal growth, and creating a life of intention. And he's the voice behind the incredibly impactful podcast, The Motivated Mind. Scott, thank you so much for coming today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
It's an absolute pleasure that you welcomed me to the show. It's phenomenal we've obviously conversed, through Patreon and email and whatnot, so it's really nice to put a face to the name, and I thank you for the opportunity and the devotion of time.
Absolutely, yes, my pleasure. Before I sort of lurch into some of the useful topics and advice, would you be able to share a little bit about yourself for those that have never come across your podcast?
Absolutely. So I host the Motivated Mind, a top 100 mental health podcast. We're at about 7 million downloads at this point. I've been doing it since October of 2018. And each week I drop 2 episodes on Monday and Thursday. And the idea is to provide my insights on how one masters their mindset and optimizes their happiness, but in a very practical, intentional, deliberate way, where we were talking offline, I think the self-help space has become overcomplicated. Wake up at 4 a.m., do 75 different things for your morning routine. It's 5 hours later, then you get to start your workday. And so the concept of the podcast is, how can I bring minimalism into individuals' digital and physical world to bring the reality that optimizing your happiness and your mindset is not this overly complex thing that it's been made out to be. And so throughout the podcast, I drop practical and tactical tips on how to do that, and more specifically, how I've done that in my life and what I've learned from that. So some of them are 30-day experiences or experiments, and some of them are just observation that I've had over being an entrepreneur and a creator, and sharing that dialogue and insight in a very, what I hope to be a helpful message.
Absolutely, and I can tell you from personal experience, it is very helpful. And as you say, I mean, for me, there's been an absolute proliferation of information out there from different sources, and it can be quite saturating. It really can be, and it really is important to peel back the layers and go to that sort of simplicity. And I love this concept of minimalism, and it's something you wouldn't know that from where I am in France at the moment. I mean, if we're talking objects, obviously we're talking the mind, but it's a very different place here. But yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for that insight. And one of the things that I've really been fascinated about, and having listened to so many of your podcasts, is about energy, about leveraging the sort of energy at the best time of day. Because for so many people, with within flexible schedules, and they're all over the shop with their timing due to their work and other commitments. Do you have any sort of top tips for optimizing energy and focus when their peak performances, my peak performances is in the morning, for example, when their peak performances just aren't available because of their demanding lives?
So this is a good question. So because it's stemmed in this idea of what's practical, right? Because you could say one thing and reality is a completely different thing. I think that the first way that I look at this is redefining what peak means. So, and why I think that's a good starting point where I've started in my life is because I'm still very young. I like to say level. I'm level 34 right now and continuing to level up every year. But there was this younger version of me that was optimize everything in my life, optimize everything. Almost like it was some sort of tech stack that we lived in or matrix that we lived in. And I think that is a very disastrous way to go about life, because the beauty of life is in this idea that it is imperfect. And so thinking about your peak performance or what peak means, there really is no ideal time for anything, right? We have a 2.5-year-old daughter, and we sat there for a while and said, I don't know if now's the right time to have a child. There's never going to be a right time. I don't know if right now's the right time to start my business. There never is a right time. Life doesn't slow down, and every day that you could reflect back on, you most likely could see how your day went by in the snap of a finger, and you never got the opportunity to do those things that you wanted. So I think first it's reframing what peak means, first and foremost. And as part of that, even if you're not at 100%, the idea that you can still divert 70% of your energy consistently beats the heck out of waiting for these perfect conditions and moments that just never come in life.
Yeah.
So I think that's point number one, right? Not trying to go for this ideal, I'll do this thing when. That never works. And if you look back at all of our lives, we've probably been saying that for 20 years about something, or 10 years about something.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
Sure, yeah,
So the data doesn't support waiting for optimal environments and times. The second is understanding and accepting that your environment is your environment. So how do you leverage it to your advantage? If your mornings are chaos, use your commute to listen to something that energizes you, a podcast, right? Or before you go to work, if you have a side business or a content business, and to your point, Alan, that in the morning, which is the same thing for me, my peak performance and energy levels at its highest, well, I devote my hardest, most challenging tasks first thing in the morning, because and when I wasn't doing my businesses full time, my companies full time, before I went into the office, I'd work on my businesses first, because I knew by the time I got home, I would be so depleted that I wouldn't be giving 100% of my energy to those things. So I think it's really about analyzing the position you're in right now. It's not one size fits all, and say, how can I use this as a fulcrum to really help accelerate me into moving forward? And I think as part of that too, there's a filter that I love to use, which is use the one thing that matters most filter, right? There's this idea every day that if I do a lot of things, that equals that I have been productive, where the opposite is actually true. I think there's a lot of correlation throughout many examples in life where more equals more. But I will say 99% of the time, less actually equals more. And I think the reason why a lot of us struggle to do or get the things done that we want to get done is because we have 20 things that we've put on our to-do list. But if we were to sit with that and ask, what's the one thing that if done today will move the needle most, and just do that thing, and you do that repeatedly, your life will be in a monumentally different place than I have 6 things to do. I get none of them done. And now it's been a month, it's been 2 months, it's been a year. Imagine the drastic difference of just one thing. And then the next kind of piece to this is state changes. So if your schedule sucks, which I've been there before, and not all the time is it ideal. You got meetings back to back, or you said yes to so many things. You need a state change more than you need time blocks. So what I mean by a state change is just get your body moving from the environment it's in. For me, I have a reminder on my Garmin watch that every 52 minutes it says move, and I'll just drop down and do 10 push-ups or 15 push-ups. I will fill up the sink with cold water and I will stick my head in it just to get pure silence and bliss nothingness. And those are enough of a trigger to get you out of this magnetized field that you're in when you're stuck in front of your computer back to back or paralyzed by all of these things. And lastly, sometimes the best use of your time is honoring that non-work energy. So the best productivity hack is sometimes to do nothing. Go to bed early, drink more water, or go for a walk. Those are part of the state changes too as well. But so again, less is more.
Fantastic. I mean, as you're speaking there, you're making me think about the author, Oliver Burkeman. He talks quite a lot about this concept of, prioritizing sort of certain tasks and not trying to get through everything on a list, for example, one of the points that you made. And because as you say before, and as it's sort of almost your mantra of late, having listened to the podcast, this concept of minimalism and less is more. And it is important just to have that. There's 2 or 3 things that are important, as opposed to thinking, I'm going to tick off this one thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then of course, as Oliver Burkeman mentions, you can't do that. And you have this sort of feeling of failure in the process. So that makes absolute crystal sense, what you're talking about there. And
it is
absolutely.
Imagine, Alan, if you and I were on the street and we pulled 10 people, 20 people in and said, what's the most important thing that you need to get done today? I would guarantee about 85% of people would struggle to answer that question, because the dynamics and the way that most people view their life is off of a long checklist, and it's defeating. And I think the best thing for momentum is built in increments, right? And so logically, in order to create incremental change, you need something, not nothing. So it could be one thing, it could be 2 things, but it definitely isn't 6 things, because you look at that and you're just overwhelmed. Like, I have so much to do, and I've also got 10 meetings, and then I got to pick up the kids from school. And then, I got to go grocery shopping after work. And then you go, when am I going to have time for all of these things? And then you don't do any of them. And then that's on repeat for the next 20, 30, 40 years until maybe something clicks. And so that's where the power is in simplicity, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. That's really good. And also a couple of the points that you made there, there's something which I do. I do set a timer as well myself, but I don't stick my head in a bowl of water. That is a good one.
It is one of the most, for me personally, one of the best feelings. We've got a 2-year-old, a 2.5-year-old daughter who is filled with energy, talking about energy, and it can be challenging between work and personal life, like I'm sure many people listening feel too, to get moments of silence and no stimulation. So there's just this feeling of having cold water around your temples and having your head submerged in water that's almost numbing in a really good way. It's almost like, this might sound crazy, you wrapped your head in tinfoil and nothing can penetrate through the tinfoil. It's just blankness. And wow. I really enjoy that feeling because of the world that we're in. It's just so noisy. It's so overstimulating. It's so depleting and distracting that how often do we get opportunities to just sit in pure silence, right? There normally isn't a lot of opportunities that we get for things like that. So that state changes is really powerful.
No, that is certainly very powerful. This idea of just, living in the moment for sure, which is something which I've talked about quite a lot on my podcast, and it's exceptionally important to get away as well from and you've mentioned it multiple times about the invasion of digital products and obviously social media, and there's so much clutter that's going on around us, and if we can sort of rid that clutter somehow by employing our own strategies in order to do that would be exceptionally effective. So yeah, great tips there. Thanks very much. There's another sort of area which I'd like to talk about, and that is the one that's often sort of regurgitated by many of the sort of self-help gurus around here, but it's something which I know that you'll probably have a great insight on, is about this idea of getting comfortable with uncomfortability. So when a challenge, for example, a situation arises that feels exceptionally overwhelming, do you have an immediate sort of step that someone or that we can take to shift our mindsets from that resistance, of a task, and getting over that sort of like, oh, I really don't want to do that, and then being able to accept that task? And so we're leveraging that sort of discomfort to produce a positive change.
This is also a great question, because how often do we come against things that we just don't want to do, or that seem like this one challenge is defining everything, right, in our life? It just absorbs us. So I'll give you actually two things. One of them is counterintuitive, so I'm going to start with that one. So, I'm going to start with that one because, Alan, you had mentioned timers. I love timers. I did a whole episode a while back where I timed literally everything I did in my life, not to over-optimize, but just to understand where I was spending the most time and if it made sense. And so I love timers. So I set a timer. If I have a really big challenge in front of me that feels depleting and as if I just don't want to do it, I set a timer for 5 minutes. And I give myself permission to wallow. So I will literally sit there and think, this sucks. I hate this. Why is this happening? This feels unfair. I let these complaints run wild. But the key is, once that timer goes off after 5 minutes, and either my phone or watch goes off, I go, okay, that's enough. Now, what can I do about it? And that external alarm and giving myself the space to just complain about it, it sounds silly, but it gives yourself this almost structured permission to be miserable, and it removes this secret resistance brewing under the surface. So it's kind of like venting to a friend who's listening without judgment, and then gently like ask afterwards, okay, so like, what's next? And so I think by consciously just acknowledging your misery, you strip it of its power. It's kind of like if you're getting bullied in school, right? But you make fun of yourself. Now the bully has nothing to use against you. And so you strip it of its power, and then suddenly it's another feeling, right? Which lasts 8 seconds, and it's not your entire reality. And then from there, you can make your next move from a place of clarity rather than this place of denial, which I think 99% of us humans live in 99% of the time.
Yeah. I tell you something, when you're talking about that is so amusing, because it just goes to show in your podcast, what I love about them is that you have this really wry, almost sardonic sort of sense of humor which kind of pervades through it. And the fact that you've just flipped that one, the idea that you spend the first 5 minutes absolutely detesting this and wallowing in this sort of self-loathing, why am I doing that, is just typical. Yeah. Typical of you, your sort of sense of humor. And that's something that I've not heard before,
Yeah, and
it's great.
And I think that's the thing, right, is don't take life so seriously. We've heard this a million times, but it's so true. How many times when we're just sitting there do we think this thing is the defining moment of everything, and that if we don't do this, like, it's this catastrophic thinking that unfolds. And that's where I think humor can be really helpful. Like, have fun with it. Like, here we are. We've all heard these statistics around the chances of us even being born, how they're astronomical. And I've been doing some interesting research and playing with ChatGPT and Grok around this idea of, like, are we the only life form out there, specifically intelligent life form? And the math seems to say, and I would have thought the other way, and I'm getting to a point here that there's no way. The math favors that that's not true. But when you start to look at some of these theories and tests, you realize that, wow, we may actually be the only intelligent life. That's different than, some sort of bacteria that lives on a planet. And if that's the case, and we're sitting here, then this means this is a valuable opportunity, like a priceless opportunity that we've been given. And if that's the case, why don't I have some fun with this opportunity, right? That this is in front of me. Let me add some humor and dimension to it, rather than this raw, like, prison and robotic experience. And and having a 2.5-year-old daughter, I think, has helped that perspective for me, because I see the way that she goes about the world, and I'm like, oh, it's so fun. You're just so giggly, and you're so intrigued, and where did that go as we got older? Why are we so serious and robotic? And so that's one way. I think the next practical tip that I have is zooming out, and not in this generic, well, it's really easy to zoom out. You look out a window or you read a book to snap you out of it. No, I actually have, so you're getting an insight into this, Alan, sooner. I have an episode coming out Monday where I talk about the world's most simplistic dashboard that I put together that transformed my life. And I call this the quality of life dashboard. So it is a way to track multiple dimensions of life instead of obsessing over one, like a singular challenge or situation. So here's how it works. It's very, very simple. It's very, very practical. And I do this every week. You rate different parts of your life on a scale of 1 to 10. So 1 being absolutely horrible, atrocious, to 10 being amazing. And it's broken down into 4 different columns. And those are area, last week, this week, and notes. So it's very, very simple. And under area, I list 6 parts of my life. Those are business, family, partner, physical, mental health, and friends. And then under last week, that's where I have the rating from how I felt the week before for each of those categories. And this week is my current rating. And then notes is just a quick reflection on why I gave it that score. Now, here's where the power comes into your question and why I think everybody should create a dashboard like this. And you define your own areas. Those just work well for me, but everybody's life's different. Now, the magic isn't necessarily in the numbers themselves. It's in the perspective that they provide. So the dashboard hasn't just helped me zoom out, but it helped me to compartmentalize, which compartmentalization isn't about ignoring problems or these hard challenges, but about recognizing that your life has literally multiple accounts, like bank accounts. And a deficit in one of those bank accounts does not mean that you have to bankrupt all the other accounts and tarnish all the other accounts. And so what you realize is that your happiness, it's not just one number, it's the sum of many parts of your life. And that has drastically transformed my ability to accept discomfort, because I'm able to see the bigger picture and therefore realize that one particular situation, it's a block helping me build my life dashboard week to week. And so I do that every single week.
Fantastic. And you've been doing that for a while, have you?
I've been doing that for a while. I don't keep historics of it. I only go a week back on that dashboard. So every 2 weeks it's drastically different. So I couldn't look back in 6 months, but that has been so helpful, and also allows me to be present and really grounded in the now and the here, because you're forced to look at how you feel right now compared to how you felt last week and how you feel about these different dimensions of your life.
Wow. We talked about this just before we came on air, and this idea that you're so young. You're actually incorporating this stuff at such a tender age. And that's amazing to be able to have that wisdom at such a formative age. And so that's incredible. One of the things that you mentioned, the first thing though as well, is something which I often think about this, and I think it filters into this idea of the finitude of life. Because, as Oliver Burkeman says, I mentioned him earlier on, you have 4,000 weeks on the earth on average, which is 80 years. And it's just this sort of notion that so many people, I don't want to sound too disparaging, but it's because people obviously get into their own sort of ruts and their sort of tunnel visions within their own lives. And they just sort of go through the motions on a day-to-day basis without really thinking about the fulfillment of their own lives. And of course, what you mentioned about the fun and having that fun and not taking things too seriously and really just looking for ways to, as you mentioned before about keeping simple, but I think that's so important because, we've got one shot at this and you don't really want to go through life. And you see people, obviously, we all have people that we know or whatever who are just constantly complaining or constantly moaning. You think your life is so poor, really, because your mindset is not really optimized in the right way.
And I think a big part of that too is that, well, look at how much noise is out there. And then it makes a lot of sense why people just go through the motions. It's like, I'm overstimulated at my job.
Yeah.
Most people don't like it. And then they come home and they're too exhausted to do anything else. So they drone out with social media or Netflix. And listen, I'm talking from experience. I used to be there. That used to be my reality until one day it was like, is this really what I'm going to do with the opportunity that I've been provided? What if I took the time that I'm spending on these useless things and actually created more than I consumed? And so it kind of worked out very naturally with the podcast that I was like, well, this is really cool. I can create and help people, but it also gives me an excuse to start experimenting day to day, like doing these 30-day experiments where I time everything or where I track my mood or where, I started where this quality of life dashboard came into play. And you start to realize that becomes fun, right? Because it's like you're in a lab, like the world is your lab and you get to experiment every day. And the idea isn't to win. It's not a game of chess or checkers. The idea is to have fun with it. The plus is that it may have a real interesting and positive impact on your day. And if not, you tried something different. I'm so attracted to individuals that when you ask them a question of what they've been up to and they say 10 different things, I'm like, tell me more. That is amazing. That you're not just like a specialist in one thing. And I think we hear that for advice a lot, right? Get really good at one thing and just do it. And I tend to lean the other way. I think you should do a ton of different things and experiment and have so much fun with it. And then maybe you land on a couple of things that you do, but, and I think that goes in direct contrast to what I was saying about more. I think that's the one area of your life where, sure, test, do different things, have fun with it, experiment with it, and don't have any expectation or run other than just, I'm doing this thing. And it would be a really cool story to tell people,
It would be. This sort of advice, this sort of stuff should be taught at schools, I think. Really, they should be doing this. So that people have kind of more mental awareness of sort of directions that they can go in, and, as you say, experiment with quite a few things and also embrace failure. Because, of course, as you experiment, you're going to fail. But, I mean, so much of the system, and, well, dare I say, I mean, you're much more forgiving than I am. When I mentioned about people moaning and complaining, and you came out with a different angle and say, well, I can understand that. But if you do take, obviously the sort of egos and the arrogance of sort of people in power, politicians and stuff, that not even having that any sort of self-deprecation, no ability to say sorry. It would be a lot better if people had that humility, and they so many people don't, unfortunately, are learning those soft skills at a really tender age when you're at primary school or elementary school would be a great thing to do. But of course, it's not part of the curriculum.
Sure.
Not in Great Britain or not in Spain.
Yeah, not in the United States either at all. Yeah, and then that's where I think that podcasts, newsletters, YouTube content, that is where consumption and creation is so important, right? Because that's where most of the ears and eyes are. And so the more that we can spread messages and dialogue and insight around our experiences, well, great, maybe we can fast track some things for some people, which could mean a drastic shift in their life.